I definitely get a few comments of, oh, you do talk a bit fast. So we are talking about the wonderful, wonderful Robert Llewellyn. Junkyard Wars.
Did you say I would like to work for him?
Well, interesting story. I had a feeling you would ask me about this. So for the launch of the iPace, I met Robert through that. And I was like, oh God, I love Fully Charged. If ever you want a female presenter, I am here.
Kind of thinking of bigger productions, is that coming out in production meetings? And they're going, can't do that yet, really, like, it's going to be too much, or...
That's a good question.
Yes. One good question.
All your questions are great questions.
It's time!
This is the Battle Approved podcast with your host, Chris James.
Battle Approved!
We're here at a top secret studio somewhere in Germany to show you something which many of our viewers may deem slightly controversial. Today, we're talking sodium solid-state lithium-free batteries.
Let's see what matters most to the generation that matters most.
I'm all about that.
If you're the on-camera person, what would you call that? On-camera person or something else?
Presenter.
Presenter.
Yeah.
That sounds better. If you're the presenter, are you producing the package too?
Yeah, so we have two different types of content that we create on the Fully Charged show. So we've got our podcasts that sit on our Everything Electric show and on the Fully Charged show podcast. And that's like, either we'll film an interview in person, kind of like this situation, or we'll film completely remotely, and we use a platform called Zencaster. There are loads of other, they're really, all very similar. And it's just literally just either recording on your phone or on the laptop camera with a mic.
Really?
Yeah. And I think that really means that we can speak to a massive, broad array of different kinds of guests, which is amazing, as long as you're willing to accommodate time zones and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when we're out shooting our shorter episodes, they are shorter, there's a higher production value to them. And typically we would have a crew of two. So two videographers, there would be a presenter. I write and research my own episodes, so I'm there in...
Definitely sounds it, by the way. Like, you really come across, like, you're really easy to understand.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted you to come on the podcast, because of that, like, just as the presenter. And then I saw the background, made it even more interesting.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I definitely get a few comments of, oh, you do talk a bit fast, and I think, okay, that sounds like my mum. But it's a fair enough point. But yeah, like, I write and research my own episodes and then present them. So we're everyone's having to wear multiple different hats. That you've got the videographers, they are directors, they are directors of photography, they are also the editors.
Yeah.
They're also having to, one person will take a bit of a lead with the shoot, so the other person is a bit more in kind of camera op role. And that sort of switches around depending on the shoot. And then I'll be there in producer capacity and presenter capacity. And my colleague Jack, he has, exactly the same thing. He writes his own episodes, produces and presents his own episodes.
Would you go on the road together and do multiple things say you go to London and do 5 things or something like that, or?
So it really, really depends. We've definitely found that there is a huge economy of scale, like I imagine you're having right now with trying to lump a load of shoots together.
Yeah.
So if we're shooting in the UK, if we're travelling more than 2 hours, we'll probably try and do multiple shoots over a number of days.
Okay.
So last year we had this, honestly, it was such a lovely week. We had 4 days where we shot in Lancaster at this amazing sort of sustainable, it's not a commune. They told me not to say the word commune, but like shared living space where they have, it's a much more, a sustainable community. So we saw a sustainable community. We saw some local authority passive houses. We saw sustainable cathedrals. We went to this incredible sustainable technology testing lab, and that was all,
It's all in the same town?
No, but it was, we were in Manchester,
Okay.
York, Lancaster, so we could kind of cluster them.
Yeah.
But when we travel abroad, obviously that's when we really need to justify the expense and obviously the emissions of travelling there. So I was recently in Vancouver, and I think we had 10 shoots in 10 days, and it was just myself and one other videographer. So it's it's super intense.
Yeah.
But I mean, amazing. And we saw some really, really cool stuff.
It's like, I mean, media, whether it's news, whatever, like, it's like, the term guerrilla marketing, or being on the front line in a war. I mean, that's what you're doing, right? Whatever you're filming, you're out there. You haven't really got much support apart from your pre-production or travel and stuff. And then you're on your own, really.
Yeah, but then do you know what? I was trying to think about this the other day of, what even is the role of a presenter in the kind of work that I do. And I think your role is kind of like, if you can imagine an old-fashioned theatre where you have the spotlight that shines onto the stage. And your role is to kind of just be the spotlight director. And you're pointing it on specific people and things. And actually, it's the people doing the doing and who are behind all of these incredible projects that we profile on the show that are doing all of the legwork, really. And it's just our job to to check that spotlight is focusing on them in the right way and for the right amount of time at the right time, all that kind of thing. So whilst it's super lean in how we produce our episodes, how we get there, actually the people, the real heroes of the story are the people we're talking about. So
Yeah, but you could say, you could flip it on the other side. You're telling their story, and if you tell a story correctly, then maybe you're the hero and help them. So it's vice versa. You're really helping each other out. If it's done correctly, then it's a great partnership.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, it's like, we're hopefully really cheerleading and pushing people into the spotlight as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it definitely is a symbiotic thing.
Should I tell you what my intro is going to be?
Oh, yeah, go on.
I was going to wait till the very end and do it and just keep going, or should I do it? Say like we didn't even speak before or anything like that.
Right.
I was going to have a cable and I was going to go like this. I was going to go like that. Go, okay, I'm now fully charged. So we got Imogen Bhogal from Fully Charged Show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's a total pleasure and delight to be here.
Was that like, did I look like a madman doing that?
For about 2 seconds, and then
How
I was
long
like,
is he going to do that?
I see the joke.
Did you know what I was going to say?
I had an inkling. I was like, this is a little bit of a dad joke.
It's a bit of a dad joke, schoolboy type thing, yeah.
But I totally appreciate it. So.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So Fully Charged, the Fully Charged show.
Yeah.
I have to say how I came about it was through the pandemic, actually, is my dad started watching YouTube, and that is one of the shows he watched. So he was like, oh, Llewellyn, you've got to watch this show, Fully Charged, blah, blah, blah. And through that, now we're like kind of 4 years on, almost up to 5 years. Now this Fully Charged show has a full team, which you're now part of. I think it's worth mentioning, saying like how it kind of started and to like where we are now, like a quick kind of map of where we are today, and then we can take it from there. But was it really just one guy that started it?
Yeah.
He didn't do it with a buddy or anything like that?
I mean, I think he recruited like a camera buddy.
Okay.
But to be honest, I think even in the early days, he was shooting and editing himself. So
yeah. And just explain who we're talking about, actually.
Yeah. So we are talking about the wonderful, wonderful Robert Llewellyn,
right,
who many people might be familiar either through Fully Charged or Red Dwarf, where he played Crichton. So, really cult science fiction comedy show. And
that's a English show, folks, as well.
Yeah.
We're coming from America here
and
well.
It is so worth checking out on YouTube or on BBC iPlayer. It's incredible. Anyway, so a lot of people know him from Red Dwarf in the early 90s. And then he went on to present a programme which in the UK was called Scrap Heap Challenge and in the US was called Junkyard Wars.
Okay.
And the premise of that being that you take different groups of engineers and they have a challenge to build something from a scrap heap
Cool.
And then they kind of compete against each other. And that show was absolutely incredible because I've worked with so many different engineers, both in my previous roles as engineer and working in automotive companies and also through the world of Fully Charged. And so many have been inspired to become engineers because of watching that show.
Really? Like even kids watching it and stuff like that?
Yeah, because, and I remember watching it when I was, I don't know, like a young child. and it being really influencing my choice to become an engineer. And I know I'm just not in any way unique for that. So, but during that experience on junkyard
It's a tongue
wars,
twister, isn't it?
yeah, in particular, he became very aware, and I guess this is in the sort of late 2000s, mid 2000s perhaps. Air quality was pretty terrible, particularly in LA.
Oh yeah,
And
smog.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the emergence of, electrification and electric vehicle technologies. Elon Musk was still just a bit of a shy and retiring nerd at that point. And he was really inspired that, this feels like something that just kind of makes sense because it's really efficient. It is tackling this very visceral problem that many people experience.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point, YouTube had just emerged as this thing. He was like one of the earliest.
Yeah, because before it was just like a cat video or something, or like Charlie bit my finger kind of thing.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was one of the very early YouTubers, I
Okay.
suppose, following.
He's an OG.
Yeah. And I think we're 14 years old this year, or we're 15 years old. So either 2009, 2010, he started talking about electric vehicle technologies. Now, over the 14 years that have followed, it's obviously, we've covered loads and loads of electric vehicles. They've totally taken off. But also, under that umbrella, you need to start talking about battery technologies, clean energy technologies, the sort of broader sustainability piece. And I came on board 3 years ago with the sort of remit to kind of talk about some of the more technical bits, given sort of my background as an engineer. And that's what I've been doing for the past 3 years.
Were you kind of scouted, or did you like meet him or meet someone, or like did you say I would like to work for him?
Well, interesting story. So,
Do you take them hostage or?
a little bit. I had a feeling you would ask me about this. So I was like, how did it come about? A couple of things. I think
Over time or something.
Yeah, so I first met Robert and the team back in 2018. And I was working at Jaguar Land Rover at that time. I'd been involved in the Jaguar I-Pace as an engineer, and then they brought, the I-Pace development story to life in this documentary that was very, very beautifully produced, and that was an external documentary company. So for the launch of the I-Pace, I met Robert through that. And I was like, oh, God, I love Fully Charged. If ever you want a female presenter, I am here. I'm desperate to be one. And we kind of, very, very loosely kept in touch at that point. Now, they were working with a lady called Maddie Moat, who's an incredibly talented, wonderful children's TV presenter. And a few people have got her and I confused in the past, which has been no bad thing for me anyway. And she kind of stopped working with the show because she's so busy with many, many other things, and did sort of present this opportunity that they do need another female person. At the same time, I'd noticed on a few of their videos that somebody had been commenting, you should get Imogen in as a presenter. So I started.
You weren't doing a little secret campaign or anything?
Well, I am really curious to know if
That'd be cool if you were.
if one of my really good friends was actually responsible for that, or even if my husband was. And I have asked my husband many times, being like, "Was it you?" And he's like,
I could tell you
"No."
in 20 years, like I did like 500 comments.
Yeah. But I like screenshotted a few of them and sent them to Dan, who's the CEO of Fully Charged. And I was like, I feels like it's maybe time to chat more seriously.
It's Imogen era.
Yeah. And obviously that had coincided with Maddie ramping down her involvement, and then it kind of went from there. And it was, it was a real gamble on their part, because I'd done very minor bits of presenting in the past, but not really anything formal. My background had been, as I said, in engineering and in sort of technical communications. And
That's great for them.
I think that's it. So I think hopefully it was worth the risk that they took on me, and then,
I like the way you say the risk.
Well, if you take Maddie, for example, who she's extremely talented presenter with a huge amount of experience, and me, who had like 4 seconds of experience, but then I come with, a different set of skills.
Yeah.
So.
I guess it was the same thing I was saying earlier while doing a podcast. When I started the Battle Approved podcast, it was just audio. So I was quite happy just being not seen. And then as YouTube grew, like I think like in the last 2 years, YouTube's just gone crazy. And if you have a podcast, you have to have the video element now. And the people are now like so on the tech side of the just the platforms, everyone used to listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts. And we all know Apple is the biggest company in the world, I think. And you'd think they should be running the show. And I'm sure they did when it was audio, right? And then Spotify came along with it, that was the new platform for music and streaming rather than buying. And you can either hate that, like that, or whatever, but it is what it is. And then obviously the big Spotify deal with Joe Rogan, where they took him off YouTube and he was exclusive for a couple of years on Spotify with video. So if you didn't have to, you would listen to podcasts audio only mainly on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But with Joe Rogan, you could watch the video. And I kind of see that for Spotify's doing that Joe deal was like getting how it kind of buffers and, like Netflix, very rare. It's always streaming nicely most of the time. I know there's the odd night where it doesn't, but that takes a lot of tech to do that, to make it buffer ahead when you're watching it. But then YouTube, I think Rob an exception, but I think then you had the YouTube generation of like kids 10 years old, now they're 20 years old, and then Mr. Beast and things like that, and the Paul brothers, blah, blah, blah. And now I feel that YouTube is the platform for podcasts, but I'm not sure if that's right. I don't know what the stats are. So are you able to like jump into the stats of Fully Charged, YouTube podcast, Spotify podcast, and make sense of what I just said statistically? Because I don't know. I'm just thinking, YouTube's got to be the most now.
So
I could be wrong.
No, it's so interesting, and it's one of those things that we spend a lot of time talking about, and then have these moments like, oh my god, how are we spending so much time trying to unpick this web? So for the Fully Charged show, we have the Fully Charged show where we put out 2 episodes a week. That is main, and those episodes are not podcasts. Those are there'll be car reviews or that kind of thing, and those are all to do with things that move, electric mobility mainly. And then we have the Everything Electric show where we put out a podcast at the beginning of the week, and midweek we put out something to do with energy, so it's stuff that generally doesn't move. That podcast, it goes on YouTube, and it also goes on like Spotify,
everywhere, whatever.
And interestingly, we find that actually it's about 50-50. 50% of our views come from YouTube, 50% come from
the other
podcast
2.
platforms.
Yeah,
and it's something that we probably should be a bit more intelligent about and do a little bit more digging. But we were surprised that it was 50-50. I couldn't give you a good reason why I was surprised, but were just
you don't have to give me a good reason. Kind of springing it on you. Like sometimes I kind of go AWOL and kind of go into this thing because like you got in front of the camera, behind the camera, even like in this studio. There's like a real cool kind of back studio as well. Someone's hitting buttons and all this kind of stuff, and people don't see that.
And do you know what? I think, and one of my friends, I promise you this is relevant. One of my really good friends, she is a food stylist. So if you look at a magazine cover, she's one of the people that does food. And so she does lots of shoots in the same way.
Getting the perfect shots and stuff.
Exactly that. And one of the things we were saying, what's so amazing about shoots and production is that everyone who's there has a really specific and critical role in producing something very, very tangible at the end of it.
Right.
And some of those things
That's
you
true.
see. In her instance, you see the food. In my instance, you see the presenters generally. But it's like such a machine, and crafting that machine so that it's super efficient and productive I think is really cool. And feeling like you're part of that team is probably the biggest reason why I enjoy what I do, I think.
Yeah. And it being a small team, like have you been on big shoots? I guess like the iPace thing was a big shoot. Was that like a movie almost, the way they shot that?
So that one was pretty lean, but I was on a shoot last year with Hyundai. Or Hyundai, sorry.
I don't know how to say that. Like I say Hyundai. I don't. If I just made that word up myself.
So I think for so long.
I love their cars.
I love their cars. I'm actually an Ioniq 5 driver. I love it.
Oh wow, I'm jealous.
But I think it's Hyundai like Sunday.
Sunday Hyundai.
But I've been saying Hyundai for so long, and then I'm like, that's not what I meant to say. Hyundai.
What about Kia? Kia. Is it just Kia?
It's just Kia.
Okay, that's easy. 3 letters.
Yeah. But I was on a shoot with Hyundai, and that was much more for advert style, so it's hugely cinematic and much bigger crew, much higher production value, and it's always so fascinating to kind of observe, who's doing what, how they're all sort of involved,
all setting up the shots and stuff.
Yeah, and we're forced to be so quick and dirty with so much of what we do. Often it would be very rare that we have more than a day to get a whole episode.
Yeah.
Whereas, I was out in Norway for a few days for this one sort of particular thing that I was doing.
Cool.
So I just love looking at something like, how many people were involved in that? What's their process? Who are the different people involved? It's so cool.
Do you, like, in terms of production, and now you're kind of part of it, are you kind of envisioning, like, you want to do, like, some big thing for Fully Charged and stuff at some point, or are you just keeping it how it is at the moment? Like, you kind of, like, if you're kind of thinking of bigger productions, is that coming out in production meetings? And they're going, can't do that yet, really, like, it's going to be too much, or...
That is a great
Or am I
question.
just... there may be nothing. You may...
No. This is a really good question. So we have at the moment 4 full-time videographers.
Okay.
And they are all exceptionally talented, but
They have to edit and stuff as well.
Yeah. And they're all so talented, but they're all very, very different in, I think, if we fast forwarded 10 years into the future, they will all be doing very, very different things because they're all like uniquely good at something slightly different.
Yeah.
Anyway, our sort of production schedule is pretty relentless. We've got sort of 53 episodes on the go. But there are definitely windows of time in the year where it's a little bit quieter. And we're like, ooh, what could we do? What creative project should we do? And then there are other shoots where they won't be very different in terms of length to what we do put out, but they lend themselves to a slightly different or slightly more creative approach. So, for example, we do a lot of cars, as we've said, but we're heading up to Scotland to film this electric fishing boat. And, the timing of this shoot has been determined by the fisherman's hip replacement. So it's given us this really small window.
Are you doing it before the...
Before,
yeah.
yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to have to wait.
Yeah, exactly. Then, that gives us a chance to be like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. We're going to be on the water. It's going to be quite atmospheric. It's, this is a...
Don't push him off the boat.
We don't want to push him off the boat. So all of those things. So we definitely try to find the shoots where we can have a slightly different creative approach. And we've got an episode going out where we filmed on a... it's really cool, actually. So Vancouver, British Columbia, it's a lot of hydroelectricity.
Okay.
So if you're a Netflix production or whatever, if you can make your production in British Columbia, your emissions from your overall production are substantially reduced because the electricity you're using is renewably generated.
Okay.
And so we went to this film production film set whereby they're trying to create much more efficient and cleaner films.
Yeah, okay.
That is so wildly out of what we normally cover, because normally we're, sort of pretty technical or very into the weeds with cars. So then you're like, okay, cool, this is an opportunity to just do something slightly different. And what we've got is a just really silly episode. And I briefed the thumbnail for it the other day, and I was like, I can't believe this is my job today. This is so... yeah, delightfully silly.
But I guess like the term, like people don't say it so much. I think I did see it in your bio or something, was clean tech. I think like 5+ years ago when people were raising money and stuff, that was like the 2 words you could put together and get big investment going. It's clean tech, it's clean tech.
Now
But it's not
AI.
used, it's what?
Now it's probably AI. Say
AI.
AI and that's how you'll raise money. But yes, yeah. I think
Oh
it
yeah,
was,
if you're an AI startup, you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. So it's like, yeah, AI is the fad right now, and clean tech was maybe the fad then. But now, I guess like with Fully Charged, saying 14 years, how do you think the pandemic moved, or like did it push electric forward, or did it go backwards through that time in your experience?
That's a good question.
Yes. One good question.
All your questions are great questions. I don't know. I don't know if you can put this down to the pandemic or just the sequence of events that we've had. Because, you know, obviously 2015 was the big Dieselgate scandal with VW. That obviously really...
I don't want to jump in, but just remind that at the end of your answer, because I've got something on that that would be worth just talking about.
Okay. We'll definitely come back to this. So I think that, you know, that definitely kicked off the trajectory of talking about electrification in a much more meaningful way.
Yeah.
Obviously, Tesla has kind of totally exploded in that time. Lots of car companies have had to make their various 2030 targets. Various mandates have come in. Those, you know, even the electric vehicle mandate in the UK, that was pre-pandemic. So that was, I think, February 2020.
Okay.
That was around the phase out of new internal combustion engine vehicles from 2030 onwards.
And these are really, technically, they're really targets, aren't they? You don't have to get too hardcore political about it. It's just a target to try and reach. Like, I want to run a marathon, for instance. Oh, I need like a year to train. You've got to like just put something out there. It's not like a lot of people think 2030 that you're not allowed to drive your gas car anymore, and that's just not true.
It's 100% not true because, you know, they will still be around. There will still be manufacturers who are making a percentage of their overall fleet will probably be petrol and diesel, and it's going to take a really long time for all of these vehicles to phase out. And I think some of the grievances that have sort of really made this feel much more of a contentious or divisive topic are that it shouldn't be up to a government, or you know, many people think it shouldn't be up to a government to decide which technology to go after, and many people think that, you know, it should have been an emissions target and we pursue a number of different technologies, so whether that's hybrids, fully electric, fuel cell, whatever.
That sounds better when you said that, like an emissions target.
But then equally, and I feel confident that electric still would have won when you look at purely energy in versus energy out, and that efficiency, that sort of efficiency equation, that electric would win. And you do need, there's also an argument to say, well, it's useful to say it's electric so that we can have some kind of coordinated approach and all the other bits involved. For example, looking at battery supply chains, looking at infrastructure, looking how the electricity grid needs to support some of those things as well. So I can, you know, there's definitely arguments on both sides. Then, of course, when these targets have kind of flim-flammed around and there's been all this kind of, you know, is it on the table, is it off the table, is it a really political topic, is it not a really political topic? That's incredibly annoying for automotive companies who are on these 8-year cycles of developing vehicles and always thinking really far ahead with regards to their production cycles and how they need to future-proof factories. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, whatever it is, stick to it because we need to make plans and we need the UK, in this instance, to be a compelling place in which to do business. And I find it so interesting that over the past 5 years, the just very, very sort of political charged conversation around EVs. And I did a podcast the other day. This fascinating guy he's quite a famous or quite a well-known Republican strategist. He, you know, led various campaigns, including Republican voters against Trump.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so that was back in 2020. And he was sort of saying, he's like, as a Republican, why have electric vehicles become so, you know, they're seen as Democrats like them, Republicans absolutely do not. Although weirdly, Republicans like Elon Musk, Democrats do not like Elon Musk, and those things.
Yeah, that is, because like you got like Joe Biden going to GM and going, what a great job, and not even mentioning Elon Musk putting every single cent into this company. That's that's the biggest slap in the face that you could, being that successful. Yeah, that's got to be the biggest slap in the face he's probably ever had in his life.
And like, I definitely don't want to get into
we don't want to get political.
Or like, I definitely don't want to go down the Elon Musk route because I think there's so many.
He's opened the doors and he's let, like, it's like a great sports person. Say like Tiger Woods of golf. Just think how many kids started playing golf and now are being and the passion he had, and like different to everyone else in golf and stuff like that. And I think it's that.
Do you know, that's possibly a perfect analogy, isn't it? Because
Thank you.
he's, no question.
You need to be my Flavor Flav, my hype man or something.
I told you it's all about the spotlight, shining the spotlight. But, you know, without Elon Musk, electric vehicles would not have gained the popularity that they have. It would not have prompted other OEMs and other car companies to make the shift in the way that they have. And they are great cars. But that doesn't mean, a bit like Tiger Woods, who's had some questionable things in his personal life.
Personal business is different though, but
Yeah.
in the spotlight, it's the same.
But and I guess that's it. The trouble is that some could argue that Elon Musk is so powerful that the line between him as a person and his own personal values, him as a businessman, there's a lot of blurring of lines, and it's difficult.
Over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about wireless, extraterrestrial, renewable energy. And if you're thinking this all sounds rather like science fiction, that's because it literally came from science fiction.
We're here at the Geneva Motor Show to see the hotly anticipated Renault 5 E-Tech, which is heading up the superstar league of much more affordable electric vehicles.
Fully charged is like, you know, it's getting the next target on the board in the office is 2 million subscribers, right? So my question to you, and being in a big channel, letting people comment, do you monitor and see what that is? Do you reply to them? And do you sometimes have to hide them and delete them?
Oh,
And the fourth, are you allowed to say the truth on this?
yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you the truthful
Okay.
answer. I would say, as a general rule, we are pretty lucky with the types of comments that we get on YouTube, and I think that's partly because our audience are deeply interested in these technologies. They come to our channel to see what's coming next, to learn more about the technology, and are grateful that there is an outlet out there that kind of can dispel some of the myths and rumours and explain some of the things clearly. So overall, we're pretty lucky. I would say that as we've kind of entered, you know, and we've definitely had a huge chunk of our audience are those early adopters who want these technologies to succeed.
Right.
And we are tipping over into that early mainstream where you have a few more people who are a bit more sceptical, or, you know, they're a bit annoyed that they may have to switch over to an electric vehicle, or they have to learn a different way to heat their home or whatever. And that also tracks how political some of these subjects have got. So there are a few more critical comments. They typically tend to be, oh yeah, but what about mining of raw materials?
That's the big one, isn't it?
It is a huge one. At which point we say, oh, we actually have done a video on that. Please go and check out this video where we explore the bits of this sort of supply chain.
That's cool. So if you've done all this content and got these videos, whatever anyone says, you can go, well, actually, if you like to watch our other video.
Yeah. And it is quite hard
And it's all explained.
to remain angry if you've been met with quite a reasonable response.
That's actually awesome.
But the ones I have not been reasonable on
Okay.
are typically, and again, I should say, 90% of the time we're very lucky. I think, you know, if you're looking at people as a normal distribution, the majority of people are apathetic and quite quiet, and that they think, oh, great, lovely video, thank you, but don't say anything. And then you get the extremes of like, that was amazing, and you're like, oh, thank you, that's made my day. And then you get the small chunk of people who are angry and need to express an opinion.
Yeah. And
then you get within that chunk of people, the people who comment about my hair or the jeans I'm wearing. And
is that female to female?
No, it will be from someone with a handle like Gary52.
Okay.
And
what up, Gary52?
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah, and then you'll go on Gary52's profile and you think this is someone who definitely isn't an Instagram model. And you think, why did you feel compelled to judge me so harshly on this really superficial level? Why did you then feel compelled to write something? I'm not here saying, oh, all right, Gary, looks like you need to get yourself to Turkey for some hair transplants. I'd never do anything like that.
Yeah.
So And I find that like a really interesting insight into people's ability perhaps to not view anyone that they see on screen as a real person. And it gives them that license to criticize on like quite a personal level. And I find it really baffling. And especially when it comes from someone who, you know, is someone who is, as I say, not an Adonis.
Yeah.
And potentially not in a position to judge a much, much younger female.
Do you, if you get that odd comment, whether it's 1 or 1,000, you saying that you haven't been a presenter for a long time and stuff, are you quite sensitive? Do you really take it to heart? Or have you now got past it? Because you've really got to, with these comments and stuff, you then got to get a thick skin. And then after that, then I think for someone that's really big, they say they don't look at the comments at all. I mean, you would think that if you don't want to see any of these comments or have comments, you just turn the comments off. But then if you turn the comments off, then you stop the talk, the town square thing, as Elon kind of says, and the sharing and the talking and all this, the engagement part of it.
Yeah, and I'd say what I read the comments for is that typically we will have someone who will say, "Oh, have you thought about exploring XYZ?"
Yeah.
Or "I had this question which you didn't quite address," and they'll say it in a really gentle way. And I am genuinely so grateful for those comments because it really informs what we then go on to explore.
Yeah, maybe
in more
you've got
detail.
really good ideas from people.
Honestly, lots of our ideas come
Yeah.
from our community of lovely, lovely, lovely viewers and listeners. But the ones where they're a bit mean, there's probably been like, and again, I do feel lucky that it's been limited, but there's probably been 3 where I thought, oh, I spent like a really long time trying to find a really clear explanation of how power density works. And that's what I've given you. And you didn't listen to any of that.
What is power density?
So the amount of power that you can get from, say, either a motor or a battery within a given volume or weight. So high power density would mean you could have a smaller battery for the same amount of power.
Right.
And so, you know, like that's where my effort goes. I haven't got some makeup artist or hair artist or like any additional budget for my wardrobe. And I'm like, I was talking to you about power density and you spoke to me about my hair looking weird. Cheers. So like on those ones, I think what I have to remember is that actually, whatever, firstly,
Yeah.
you know, I can't change how I look. This is just how I look. That's fine. Number 1. Number 2, just if people feel compelled to say something, then and say something on such a kind of like whatever kind of level, you're like, I'm sorry that you don't have something more interesting to care about. And in that regard, perhaps I have a bit of empathy that maybe their day was just very boring.
When it comes to our homes, we kind of know what we need to do to decarbonise them. Insulate them to make them more efficient, power them with solar, heat them with a heat pump. Kind of straightforward, at least from a technology perspective. But when it comes to industrial processes like making paper, chemicals, food processing, beer brewing, basically anything around you, that's where things get a little bit more complicated.
But when does stimulating and supporting a domestic automotive industry tip over into protectionism? How will that change the dynamics of the automotive industry as we know it today? Who stands to benefit and what's the right response?
Follow us on all socials at Battle Approved. That's at Battle Approved.
The charging thing feels daunting until you live with an EV for 2 weeks. And I had an Uber driver the other day, and honestly, like, felt so sorry for him because he just got a BYD. It's an amazing car.
Oh, yeah. That's nice.
Yeah.
My father and I worked at Dolphin,
Yeah.
which is a better car for the UK.
Yeah.
'Cause
Like,
it's smaller.
you know, and really low cost, like really great cars. And Uber, I think, have some kind of incentive for you to go electric. And they also have a partnership with BP Pulse, so a charging network here. Now, there are lots of BP Pulse chargers, but there are infinitely more types of other chargers. So this Uber driver, he'd had his car for I think a month, and he was like, oh, you know, I'm definitely getting used to planning charging. He's like, because there aren't loads of BP pulse chargers. And I was like, have you got ZapMap, which is the app that we use here that lists all of the chargers, and you can filter them based on like speed, brand, whatever, like do your route planning. And he was like, no, what's that? I was like, I feel that's so mean of Uber not to have that as part of their if
Step
you were
one,
going electric,
download ZapMap.
get ZapMap. And it was like, he checked it out on my phone and was like,
He's probably going wild. He's going, oh my God.
his like world just opened up. So, I think it's all about that access to information, figuring out for what works for your life, basically.
You mentioned Electrify America, which kind of goes back to Dieselgate.
It does.
Right? So my very limited information, because I'm a bit of like a speed reader or whatever, was the Dieselgate thing is Volkswagen, right?
Yeah.
And then part of their slap on the wrist for this thing, with the amount of money they had to pay or something, was let's do something better, and they Electrify America was, I don't know if that was the only thing they had to do, but it was one of the key things that say hundreds of millions of dollars, put it all into Electrify America. Now, before you take the lead, because you know what you're talking about and I don't, is that Electrify America, I've seen what they look like. This is in the States. The Chargers look like they're something from the 70s. They look ugly for a start. And even a startup could design something way better and look cool and go, invest in this cool looking charger. They got hundreds of millions, maybe billions. And they design this thing that looks absolutely horrible. The other thing is, I don't know how many they've done and how much money it's cost to do this, that, and the other. And rather than me waffling and going on and on about, since I've got you in front of me, from Dieselgate to Electrify America, and if Fully Charged have even talked about Electrify America, please go. Please start.
So, okay, what to say about Electrify America?
I would say on maybe what are the positive parts of it?
Okay, that I could do. I can do both. So, I recently saw they have a brand new station at 998 Harrison Street in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco. It's really beautiful. They've it's indoors for starters, so you go into this lovely white building and there's 20 lots of 350 kilowatt chargers, so you can have a really quick turnaround.
I see, drive inside something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then it's got 24/7 security. The roller shutters come down. So
this sounds good so far.
It is good. Yeah. They toilets and vending machines, and it's actually got a meeting space, all that sort of stuff. And that experience, I think, is Electrify America looking really, really, really great. But
you leave. What about Middle America?
Well, I think early charging companies, so this isn't unique to Electrify America, although I think they have also had some of these experiences. Early charging networks, I feel, suffered from not brilliant reliability.
Yeah.
Through virtue of being there first, I think, and just the technology was still evolving. And the communication protocols between vehicle and charger are quite complicated. It needs loads of stakeholders to be totally on board in that. And chargers that you see today are much, 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 much more reliable. But secondly, in those early chargers, the payment systems were just quite crap. You would probably have to get an app, and you couldn't just do contactless payment or card payment. That certainly in the UK is not the case anymore. You have to be able to just do tap and go.
That's only just starting to happen in America. When you think it would have been way before England.
Yeah, and you're like, come on, man, how long have we had contactless? And then there have been other challenges around, and certainly in the UK, sure it's the same in the US, where chargers have kind of just been placed in random bits of car parks, and they haven't...
And maybe not in the best areas as well.
Yeah, so they've not really thought about lighting, signage, accessibility for those with, who might be in a wheelchair, who might have prams and buggies and that kind of thing. So there's been a lot of kind of having to fix some of those problems through providing better lighting, better signage, better spaces around spaces, parking spaces, etc. And there are some people who I think are absolutely nailing this. So my favourite one is FastNed. And
Fast
FastNed.
Ned, N.
NED,
NED.
yeah.
And which country are we talking about?
So they're all across Europe, including
Okay,
the
Europe.
UK, but they are a
FastNed.
Dutch company initially. And they have these very beautiful architectural structures that sit over the top of the chargers, which are solar powered. And so they're immediately identifiable. And so you're not having to kind of think, oh, where can I find the charger in the car park? You see it immediately. It's a good landmark and they look nice. They are well lit. The chargers themselves, it's really easy to follow. You could, if you'd never charged a vehicle before in your life, you could turn up and you would really quickly be able to figure it out.
Can you see a FastNed segment on Fully Charged?
I think we've done one.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are other people like them who I think are doing a really good job of thinking how can we make this better? And then I think the other thing that's really interesting that's emerging is that there are certain car brands who are thinking, well, hang on a second. If we can start to get into the charging puzzle a little bit, that's dwell time that customers have. It's part of extending the brand experience. And how can we capitalize on that? And I think that forces a better charging experience as well.
So, yeah, I think banks have started to do that as well in the States, where it's like a cafe, like in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
You go to Santander. How do you pronounce that?
I've always said Santander, but
Okay, I think that's how you are meant to pronounce it, Santander. They have a cafe there, so you can sit down. It's not like just going to a counter. Being in the UK as a kid, I just remember like queuing up in the post office, queuing up in the bank. It's just like, and we're very impatient, but very patient. It's like we keep it inside, like we're cursing everyone, but we'll stay in that queue for 2 hours if we have to.
yeah.
That's starting to go away now, but the branding, people get very excited, like a new brand like this FastNed. It's like the first time I've heard it, so I'm gonna like check it out and stuff. So we go back to the States, you've got the Tesla supercharge network, which is amazing. I've actually heard, and I'm not sure if it's correct, hearsay that the charging network is worth more money than the car company.
Ooh, interesting.
Or it is in the future as well.
Well, I don't know the numbers, and I'm definitely going to do some
Yeah.
Googling after this, but certainly, especially as they've opened it up to different
Yeah, now
manufacturers.
right.
Yeah. Like,
That's the cool thing in the States with the what's this bit that you call where you charge it in?
the plug?
The plug, yeah. But I think there's another. Anyway, the plug. All the cars, and it's all one plug now. It's not all different ones.
Yes. So there's been the charging standard and the sort of shape of the plug. And,
Yeah, the
and
shape.
What happens? That's many cars or many brands have decided to take on the NACS
Yeah, that's right.
protocol, which is the Tesla.
Yeah,
one.
and that's massive all around, because now, whether you're a small startup or it means you're not battling within the EV world. It's all like this is, and at the end of the day, it's just really the plug, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, and I think it also really demonstrates the point that if you are producing a new product of any type, think about the full holistic picture. So I think many car companies just produced a car. Tesla obviously were like, if we're producing these cars, we need to have a fantastic seamless charging network. The
Yeah.
two are so intrinsically linked. You cannot have one without the other. They did that extremely, extremely well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, now all these other car companies like,
That's where I want to go with
Yeah,
the conversation a little bit.
yeah,
Because like in America, you've got VW, slap on the wrist, Dieselgate, hundreds of millions of dollars trying to do some technology when Tesla's doing an amazing job. So it's like starting from scratch, probably wasting hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get the technology right. And then here in the UK, you see BP Pulse. So BP, which is like, gas stations and stuff. I know they're doing other things, and but it's almost like they've chosen the wrong people to do it on the other side, away from Tesla. It's like you need you know what I mean? There's a lot of money there's definitely a lot of money being wasted, or has been wasted. And I know you have to do that. You have to burn through the money. Like in the States, it's the question is, what's your burn rate? And it sounds cool, But it's like, how much are you losing a day or a week or a month on just like Shark Tank? What's your burn rate? It's not like how much money you're making. It's how much money you're losing.
Oh, completely. And I think this is where, we on the one hand, we kind of have to remember that a lot of this stuff is still reasonably new. So, of course, anything that's happened so far, the teething issues are going to be really, really apparent.
But just on that side, sorry for butting in there, we're kind of debating or something, I think now, but